Hello, everyone. This is Emily. Today I'm going to talk to you about three prominent, well-known short stories from Ray Bradbury's The October Country. We are in autumn right now. This is a fantastic collection of Ray Bradbury short stories. I believe it includes, I think, 17, maybe 19 of the short stories. They were published in 1955, but they originate from his 1947 collection of short stories from the Dark Carnival, which the Dark Carnival concept story kind of morphed later into Something Wicked This Way Comes. But we're going to just talk about these short stories today. The October Country, absolutely gorgeous book. I love it so much. You know, Ray Bradbury was a very prolific writer. He was more of a short story a writer than he was a novelist or author. We all know that he wrote Fahrenheit 451, but Something Wicked This Way Comes, The Halloween Tree, just absolutely gorgeous shorter books. However, his short stories were really what made him so well known, so famous, so brilliant. So I'm going to talk a little bit about him, and we're going to talk about the three stories. We're going to discuss how they overlap, common themes in them, what to look for, a little bit about personification and symbolism, and some underlying sort of allegory in these as well. So the three particular stories we're going to talk about today are the lake, the emissary, and the Scythe. The Scythe. I can never pronounce this tool, the Scythe. I'm going to call it the Scythe. It's probably not even correct because I am not an outdoor person or a farmer by any means. So we're going to talk about those three. I didn't want to do a compare and contrast about all the short stories because some of them are a little bit different and relate more to one another, than others do. And I think these three are the best for a common theme. So in the October Country, we have this gorgeous autonomous feel in writing, some more than others. And now I want to say that Ray Bradbury was a huge fan of John Steinbeck. So we see a lot of that style of writing, that descriptive landscape, like you might have seen in like East of Eden, for example. And so Ray Bradbury kind of was a transcendent author, writer. He did a little bit of influence from horror, which we see in this. He did a lot of influence from science fiction, such as in the Martian Chronicles, which is another short story collection. He did a lot of fantastical fiction. So he kind of transcends genres, and in some of his writing you can see a little bit of each genre, and in some of his writing you see just that genre. So this is an absolutely just brilliant writer. And I have to say, as one of the greatest writers, one of the greatest American writers, I have to say that he might not be the top of my favorite, but he is extremely high up there, maybe the top 5% of skilled, just genius, descriptive, detailed writer. So he can bring, through his descriptive writing technique, he can bring to life any scene, any story, short or long, from how he creates the world, like the world building, but real life elements. So how he describes the setting, uses the senses, touch, sight, sound, smell, feel, and how he tells the story through fabulous descriptive writing and sensory detail. It is so gorgeous, and his writing is so lyrical, and it's just lovely. There's this prose in there. The stories are easy to consume, easy to read. And one of my favorite books of all time is The Halloween Tree. I read it every year in Halloween. It's the most Halloween-ish feel of any kind of writing I've ever read. So quintessential Halloween, and despite the loveliness of the writing, it's not like these long-winded sentences, kind of like I might give when I'm giving you my lectures. So it's easy to consume for anybody. Um, in this particular set of short stories, we're going to talk a little bit about how many of almost, I don't want to say almost all, majority of the stories in the October Country are about death. We're going to be talking about death. We have, I don't want to be morose. These stories are kind of the macabre feel of the study of the darkness in all people, but all people are capable of sort of the netherworld of the human soul, if that makes any kind of a sense. And it's really he really explores what it means to be a human, the plight of the human being from birth to death, and what it means to be alive versus to die, and the inevitable, how everybody's going to die, and how death affects everyone differently. Death comes for you, death comes for me, and we watch others die, and how that death affects our lives, transcending grief and emotion into survival, where we explore things like trauma and loss in these stories. I guess, and most of these stories in this book, we're just talking about I'll try to stick to just the three we're talking about here. One common thing you're going to see in all of these stories is children die, in all three of them. Nothing terrible and grotesque. So there's just a little bit of chilling, disturbing feel to it. Like not quite outright horror, but sort of he takes the disturbing elements of death and makes it like where you feel you're experiencing it and you're disturbed from it through reading it or witnessing it, I guess is the best way that I can describe it. So I think that the imagery that he uses to create the death is subtle and classy and really well done. So let's talk about our three stories. I have my quotes. I print off my Bookly app from when I read a few particular quotes I'm going to want to share here. When we get to each story, I'm going to talk about the emissary first. The emissary is the most autonomous of the stories. It has the most feel of Fallen Autumn. If you really want to sink into the world, the smells, the sounds, the visual, the colors, the crisp leaves, the earthen tones, it's just so fabulous. It's so fabulous. And you don't really understand what's happening until you get to the end. This is a short story. So the emissary let's talk about the plot. The emissary is about a boy, a young boy. We don't know up front he's a boy, but we figure it out because he refers to his mom in it. A sick boy, a boy who has an illness, who cannot get out of bed or cannot leave the house and is no longer the free roaming, happy, healthy boy he once was. And he is living the experience of the outside world, of what he is missing out on through his dog. The definition of emissary is special messenger. So, in short, so the dog is his emissary. The dog is going out and experiencing the world for him and comes back, and the boy, through his senses and imagination, experiences what's going on out in autumn, out in the town or the farm or whatever through his dog. And it's so brilliant. I've never read anything like it. It's so interesting. And I have to say, you see a lot of authors, writers, same thing, who make these fantastical worlds come alive with sensory detail, but you don't often see through scent. Usually it's visual, right? The autumn leaves colors and the maybe the sound of the blowing, whatever. But in here we have a lot of reference to smells, more than I've ever seen. That is so effective. If you want to know if you're a writer as well, you want to know how to write scent or smell to bring the scenes to life for the reader, this story would be a good example to study how to do so. So the emissary, as we're reading the story, we do develop some questions like, why can't the boy go outside? Why is he experiencing it through his dog? It doesn't outright say that he's sick. It doesn't outright say that he can't go outside. Like we don't really understand what's going on until we kind of get toward the end and then we reread it. But I'm just kind of giving you a heads up to what to look for. We don't know why can't he go outside? The dog comes in, he feels the dog's fur, he can feel the crunch of leaves stuck to his fur, the thistles stuck in his fur, the what's on his breath from eating fresh earth, or the scent of fresh wet mud from his fur, or just imagining the dog picked up the smell of hickory smoke through running through someone else's farm and things like that. And I'll read you a quote from it. I think I have, um, well, let me read you a little quote here. He knew without hearing where dog had rattled down hills, where autumn lay in cereal crispness, where children lay in funeral pyres, in wrestling heaps, the leaves buried, but watchful, dead leaves, as dog and the world blew by. Martin trembled, his fingers searching the thick fur. He read the long journey through the dog, through his stubbed fields, over glitters of ravine creeks, down marbled spread of cemetery yards, into the woods. In the great season of spices and rare incense, now Martin ran through his emissary, which is the dog, around and round the route all the way home. So the dog comes back from his outdoor rounds, and the boy, I almost thought he was blind, like he lives to the senses combining the imaginings and the sense of the dog and the feels and what he knows of autumn and can hear outside and brings autumn to life to himself through his dog as the messenger of autumn. Um, so in this way, we have the dog almost has a little bit of the dog himself is kind of metaphorical for the season. He's standing in for the only the experience that you normally would have if you're a boy and you go outside, right? So we have a lot of that. Um, so what happens though, one day the dog goes missing. He doesn't come back for a few days. The boy imagines him dead, which is terrible. How is he going to experience the outside world now? Um, Now there isn't even going to be autumn, for there was no dog to fetch it for him. There would be no winter, for who would bring the snow to melt in your hands? No more seasons, no more time. The go-between, the emissary, was lost to the wild throning of civilization, maybe poisoned, stolen, hit by a car, left somewhere in a culvert. So, in silence, Martin lay, following the great move of stars down a clear and moonlit sky, remembering nights such as this when he had spanned the town with his dog. And I'll get into that quote in a minute. So the dog goes missing, um, and the boy starts grieving that was his last attachment to life, to experiencing life. And then we have memory of the boy when he was healthy and normal and could run free into the wind and through the leaves with the dog behind him or ahead of him. And we suddenly start getting this feeling of loss and nostalgia for. Then we realize there's something wrong with this boy because we were starting to feel nostalgia for times gone by. We see the boy experiencing grief, loss of the freedom he had, loss of the life he lived. We see we can experience his grief for something he can't do anymore. And then we kind of realize what's going on, that he must be ill. We don't really realize how bad until the end. So we have that. Um, but here we have that referenced in this quote on page 121, when he's following the stars and moonlit sky. He remembers nights such as this, when he had spanned the town with dog ahead, behind, round about, tracking the green, plush ravine, lapping slumberous streams, gone, milky with the fullness of the moon, leaping cemetery tombstones while whispering on the marble names on them, quickly running through the shaved meadows where the only motion was the on-off quivering of stars, to streets where shadows would not stand. So, it's beautiful how Ray Bradbury shows how this boy had the normal freedom of childhood of experiencing joy and the limits of of how much we take that for granted, especially as a child or even as an adult. And now this boy can't do these things, and all he can do is imagine it or live it through his dog. So we really feel this grief, this loss, this sadness. It's almost like we don't want to look and see what's going to happen next because this poor boy, like we can't imagine what could have happened to him. Is he paralyzed? Is he sick? Is he blind? It's really kind of a sad feel we get. So also, let's talk about personification. Ray Bradbury is classic as a writer to use personification, which is a literary term, which means making non-living objects seem alive, having a life of their own, or being human-like, or in some way. So in this case, autumn, the season, is alive. Personification we see through the season of autumn, right? I mean, obviously the dog is already alive, so right, we experience autumn as a living thing because as you read this prose, it's the how autumn has its own life of how it breathes and how the wind sounds and how the leaves go through cycles and how the wind that brushes through the trees whispers messages of times gone by to people walking through the woods. And so autumn is brought to life like it's a living, breathing thing as a season. And this boy longing and nostalgia and grief for wanting to go be a part of it again. So take a little look for evidence of that personification when you're reading The Emissary. So we have that, and then we get to the end, and the end was a little baffling. I had to read it and study it a couple of times. We have the dog, goes missing for a while. The dog comes back way later. The boy is relieved and happy and gleeful. The dog is alive, but something is wrong. Something is different. He doesn't smell fresh and happy and joyful like autumn. It smells different, like darkness, like this is where the horror comes in, the macabre. He smells like dirty and dark and terrifying and like he's been digging in graves and like the dog brings death to the boy's bed because the boy is in bed, hears the dog at the door coming up the stairs, jumps on his bed, he's happy, he's gleeful, and then he realizes, wait, something is not right. Something is terribly wrong, in fact. So um, I have that quote here. I dropped a page. I have that quote here. I can tell you. Hi. Oh, I got too many pages here. Run. Oh, that's interesting. It was a smell of strange earth. It was a smell of night within night, the smell of digging down deep in shadow through earth that had lost a cheek jewels with things that were long hidden and decayed. And it goes on and on. So basically, it's like he's digging in graves or tomb, like I kind of got the vibe of Tutankhamun's tomb where he buried alive with all of his goods and jewels and things like that. But Tutankhamun is, I guess, the correct pronunciation. But yeah, so the dog brings death, and the boy is suddenly aware of his heightened emotions, disturbed, fearful, um, like that cycle of living through the dog and remembering his joyful days as a child, living autumn is done. It was a cycle. It's come to its close. The dog brings death in smell, and it symbolizes the boy's death. So we know that the boy is going to die. And then we hear steps. Then the boy hears with the dog, after the dog, steps, someone coming for him up the steps. And again, more personification. We think it's a human, we think it's a person or something creepy, right? That horror element. But it is not. It is symbolic. The sound, the dog bringing the smells of death, the sound he hears coming up the stairs behind the dog, coming toward his room, is death coming for the boy. So the dog was the symbol of his impending, looming death. The dog is a symbol for his looming death. So yes, we have a sick boy who dies in The Emissary. The most autonomous, very sad. We have, again, a little bit of the common theme. We'll talk about themes at the end. I'm going to get into the next story now, which is The Lake. All right. Do I have my quotes for The Lake? All right. So The Lake is a story about, now The Lake is really interesting. Ray Bradbury himself, as a child, a pre-adolescent, whatever age, 10, 11, 12, experienced the death of a girl that he loved or was his girlfriend, a friend who was a girl as a child. I guess you can't say girlfriend at that age, but so he was for real at a lake. He had a friend he had met along the lake, a friend who was a girl. And long story short, the girl went in and didn't come back out in front of him. She drowned. So that kind of trauma, that experience, that vividness of memory, the early introduction to death to a child, pre-adolescent child, really did fuel his writing. And writers, tortured people are often make the best writers. The grief comes out in your writing, and healing and closure. So in The Lake, we have a boy, 12 years old, who's down by the lake at the very tail end of summer, getting ready to go back home from the lake with his mom. And before it's time to leave and go on the train, we'll talk about the train as a symbol in a moment. He wants to run back to the lake one more time. And so the first image we get is of the boy running down to the lake in the very same style in the emissary of the boy who was dying. We saw in the emissary the boy having a memory of when he was young and was running free. Well, now we have an actual boy around the same age running free and being happy and free in nature. So, very similar. So there is a similarity in the two there. If you wanted to tie those two together, if you're writing an essay or something like that. We have, did I write that quote down? Ba-da-ba. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, the stories are short, you can read them, but actually, let me first read. I first wanted to say there's some mention of autumn coming because this is the beginning of autumn, but really there's more summer descriptive writing in this book. Let me read the quote. All the hot dog stands were boarded up with strips of golden planking, sealing sealing in all the mustard, onion, meat odors of the long, joyful summer. It was like nailing summer into a series of coffins. I love that line. One by one, the places slammed their covers down, padlocked their doors to the wind. They came, they touched the sand, blowing away all the millions of footprints left from July and August from passers-by. So this is the transition of summer into fall, is when this story takes place. So I guess I didn't write down that quote. That was a great quote. Anyway, there's a quote where he's running through free, like experiencing the joy of running in the wind toward the lake as a boy, the freedom of it, the youth, the innocence, and it's the same feel we got in the emissary from the boy, remembering how he used to be able to do that. So take a look for that if you're comparing. So anyway, the boy gets down there and he remembers from the previous summer Tally, this sweet blonde haired girl, 12-year-old girl, same age as him, who was his friend. And this one it's like he knew her somehow. Compared to in real life, I don't think he knew the girl. But yeah, the girl, pretty, and he had like a little crush on her. She went in, swam into the lake, and didn't come out. She drowned. She died in front of him. And there's references to, like in the story, the lifeguard trying to save her. The lifeguard tried to persuade her to come out, but she did not. He came back with only bits of water weed in his big knuckled fingers, and Tally was gone. She would not sit across from me at school any longer, or chase indoor balls on the brick street on summer nights. She had gone too far out on the lake, and the lake would not let her turn around or come back. The lake took her. Yeah, and not let her return now. And this lovely autumn, when the sky was huge and the water was huge and the beach was so very long, I had come down for the very last time alone, and that's as a child. So we see again, let's talk about personification again. We see personification, the lake is almost alive, and we'll talk about that more at the end. The lake is like a living thing. And so this story is really about a transition of a, a boy into manhood and that trauma following him. So we then suddenly it skips right to the future. He went home. I lengthened my bones. I put flesh on them. I changed my young mind for an older one. I threw away clothes as they no longer fitted, shifted from grammar to high school, and then there was a young woman in Sacramento. I knew her and we were married. And by the time I was 22, this was 10 years later, I had almost forgotten what the East was like. So he goes into an adult, he takes his trauma with him, normal life. 10 years later, now we see him traveling with his wife. They go back to his hometown and he wants to go to the lake. He wants closure. So he goes to the lake for closure. And his wife is all excited and happy and she wants to swim. And he says, stay there. And he goes up to the lake and he's looking at it and having the memories. Well, she stays behind him. He's having the memories of what happened. But in this story, the lake is supernatural. It's like a living thing. This is the personification. It's supernatural. It's like a cursed evil lake that's teaching him a lesson. I guess is how you can put it. So suddenly, as he happens to be at the edge of the lake, some people off to the side are carrying a body bag, bringing up a body of a girl, dropping it right at his feet. Like, what are the chances? And then the person is saying they just found this drowned girl from 10 years ago. The only one they never found that drowned there. Like, it's obviously supernatural because of the coincidence. How could it be the 10 years he happens to pop by that lake is the day the body is found, you know? So it's obviously some kind of a supernatural event. Um, so then, yeah. So then, we have that happens, and then he demands to have the body bag open. He wants to see, and he sees his friend's body, his 10-year-old little girl friend, and now he's a grown adult. But she remains timeless. She remains the same. She remains youthful. Her hair is still blonde. Her body's decayed, of course. So there's that little bit of macabre in there. But we have of the lake functioned as a transport to him, kind of to bring him back to that time, to show him his unresolved grief. And so we see he suddenly has this realization of what it means to be a human. Here, his life went on from childhood to adulthood, the normal progression of the life's journey. Whereas this girl was timeless. She didn't age. She didn't change. She still had her blonde locks. She was the same size of a small girl while he went on to now is now transformed on the normal evolution of a human life. So it kind of brings him to thinking about life and death, and we have more of that theme we get into of life and death and what it means to be alive and what it means to die young. So we see a little bit of that. And so really the undertones of the story is trauma, grief, and loss. Another death of a child as well. This one based on a real story. So but the story itself is metaphorical, right? The story is like a metaphor for an adult's struggle with trauma from the past and the inability to move on. Because what happens next is he turns away, they take away the body, he turns away and goes back to his wife, who still was in her bathing suit or ready to go in, smiling at him. And the last line is, he doesn't recognize her. Who is she? Because the lake transported his mind to a young boy's body and time when he was experiencing this grief and loss. It His current adult life was destroyed by sort of the lake's supernatural powers, and because he can never really get over his first love, which was the young girl, the little girl. So now suddenly he can't view or recognize or see his wife in front of him for who she is because that trauma stayed with him. So it's really brilliant the way it's written. I think it's a little more sci-fi undertone than you might have gotten in where you get more horror undertone in The Emissary. And it's sad to think that this was a real story for him and this really happened. So, I want to talk a little bit about the train. There's a mention of a train. At the beginning of the story, he's talking about his mom's going to take him on the train home away from the lake. And then later he talks about how the train again, there's a lot of beautiful quotes about a train. When you want to talk about personification, the train is almost alive. The train has the power to make you forget things, to take you on new journeys, to pull you from your problems, to open your imagination, to make you feel things. It's really brilliantly written. I thought I put down a quote, a little quote. A train has a poor memory. It soon puts everything behind it. It forgets the corn land of Illinois, the rivers of childhood, the bridges, the lakes, the valleys, the cottages, the hurts, and the joys. It spreads them out behind as they drop back into the horizon. And there were many other quotes as well about trains. But here's another one. Like a memory, a train works both ways. A train can bring rushing back all the things that you left behind many years before. Um, so the train itself is like has the power to transport you emotionally, psychologically, not just physically. So it almost has some of those lifelike qualities as like the lake kind of has these lifelike qualities. Um, I have a good quote I did put on here about the girl when he sees the body in the body bag from an adult perspective. The lake, I thought, people grow. I have grown, but she has not changed. She is still small. She is still young. Death does not permit growth or change. She still has golden hair. She will be forever young, and I will love her forever. That right there is the whole sort of, if there was a hypothesis of a short story, that would be it. Like that is the main premise of the entire story, and that would be on page 114 if you have the copy that I have. And I'll link below this copy of the book in my comments below. All right, so let's go on and talk about the Scythe, and we'll talk about common themes at the end. The Scythe, the Scythe, like, we think about John Steinbeck, we think The Grapes of Wrath, we think East of Eden, all, we think about the fields and the California Valley, the cutting down wheat and the farmers. You can think about even other books like of Mice and Men, about the wheat and the farmers and the early 1900s, kind of same time period. It seemed like this is when it was written. So because Ray Bradbury was so influenced by John Steinbeck, we can feel a lot of Steinbeck in this story. This story has a little bit of a base of more horror base in it, but also some supernaturally stuff. The skit is really about a man, a poor man, and his family, wife and two kids, who were really down on their luck and were just perusing around in a car about with no resources. They come across an abandoned farm. They go into the farm, into the house to see who's there, and they find a man who is dead in a suit with a sign on him and a scythe, which is like a tool, basically like a whoosh, whoosh, it's a tool apparently. Um, he so it's a wheat stalk chopper, is what it is. The man has a note saying, whoever finds this, you can have my farm, take it over and do my good work and yada yada. But it is an evil farm. It is a cursed farm. This is where the horror elements come in. We have some of that foreshadowing. We just get a vibe that things are not right, that you don't just walk in and take someone's farm because they leave a note and just go bury the body yourself and don't call it in. Like there's something, everything feels wrong about this. So we get a lot of suspense in this one. And if I did not know anything about the story before reading, I would have been confused and have to read it twice, but I'm going to give you some heads up on it. This story is really about the life and death cycle, right? That the fear of death is the human condition. The Scythe, I keep changing it. I don't know how to say it. I'm going to admit it. Um, the Scythe itself, the story is based on a biblical allegory of the Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper represents death. So the Scythe, the tool, as well as the story itself, is based on a biblical allegory of death, the Grim Reaper. So the main character, becomes the Grim Reaper basically by taking over the farm and being the one to start controlling the tool. We're going to call it the cursed tool, the cursed Scythe, whatever it is. So yeah, personification again, we have the Scythe itself is almost an evil thing, living thing that does damage and knows what it's doing and is controlling him and pulling him out to go out and chop every day. Chop wheat, chop wheat, chop wheat, rain or shine, can't control himself, can't stop. And he gets almost obsessed with it, and he gets more and more feeling something's not right, something is wrong, dark feelings, shaky feelings, evil feelings, everything doesn't seem right while his wife and kids are going about their normal farm-like activities. So the Scythe itself is kind of the symbol, the tool for the path of life. Like we see the wheat crops are doing weird, creepy, supernatural things. They grow and die in the same night, regrow and die in the same night, abnormally for a farmer that knows something's abnormal about it. So he chops down, they redo over and over, come back just like that. Well, as time goes on, he starts hearing noises. Every time he's chopping wheat, he's hearing screaming and getting images of people being murdered and dying. And he learns that he is killing hundreds of people every time he chops down wheat. He learns he is the Grim Reaper and he is like, can't stop. He can't stop. Um, so and the Scythe, we talked about, and the field itself. Well, the tool is sort of the instrument for the deed, but the field itself is kind of alive. It's creepy. It makes noises. There's sounds coming from it. It changes. It does unusual things, like it's being controlled. Quote, Scythe, the fields grow crooked, wild, like a crazy thing. So Ray Bradbury calls the field a thing, like it's alive, like it's a creature or a monster. That's what that personification there. There's other literary terms being used in this kind of writing, but that I don't want to use too many. I want to keep it simple for you. So quite here he starts transforming as he's cutting things. Something doesn't feel right. Quite suddenly he felt very old. The valley seemed ancient, mummified, secretive, dried and bent and powerful. When the Indians danced on the prairie, it had been there, this field. The same sky, the same wind, the same wheat. And before the Indians, the Cro-Magnons, gnarled with shaggy hair, wielding a crude wooden scythe, come up and perhaps rolling down over this living wheat, still living, still growing. So he comes to learn that he can't really control cutting. He can't, he tries to stop, he puts it away, and then he gets getting pulled back and worse things happen. He finally realizes that some of the his family, his daughter, his children, and his wife are blades of grass that have to be killed. Like every blade of grass are represents people dying, certain people, and eventually he realizes their more lives or mortality are in the field, and he knows he's supposed to cut them down and that they will die. And like he knew that after he cut some blades of grass that he had just killed his mother because he could hear her screams and he get a vision of it. And then he got a letter a few days later. Oh, well, guess what? My mom died. So, and he can't stop himself. So, he tries not to cut down his family's blades of grass, and then suddenly his house burns down on fire. Beautiful description of like a burning inferno of a house. Great, great descriptive writing. But the fire burns all around his wife and children who are just asleep. It's nighttime because he goes out in the field at night. He's cutting. Suddenly his house is on fire in the night sky. But he goes, runs up to it. The fire is burning around them. They're untouched, but they also won't wake up, but they're not dead. Then he realizes they were supposed to have died yesterday in the wheat he was chopping, and he went around them. So it was, this is kind of all about destiny, about inevitability of the lifespan. We can't really control it. They were destined to die on the previous day's date. It was supposed to have been by him, but since it wasn't him, they were going to die either way. So they're stuck in this limbo between life and death, and not quite dead, but they can't come back awake either because technically that was their death date. That humans can't control their death date most of the time, other than the obvious. But like taking your own life, I guess. But beyond that, so he is forcefully pulled to go back to the field and chop until he knows he kills them. And he can't stop himself. And he just gets darker and eviler and darker, and he knows that they die. So we have more children dying. But this time they're murdered. Versus in the lake, it was an accident, and in the emissary, it was an illness. So we have child death in all of these three. But when he knows he cut the blades that killed them, he goes like obsessed. He can't stop himself, and he just goes full on passionate about chopping wheat. And I love how Ray Bradbury wrote his little rampage demo here. Yeah, so he writes, I dropped some pages. I have like 5 pages of quotes from my Bookly app. I always write down my favorite quotes. Oh yeah, here it is. All right, I'm gonna read this. It's crazy. This is on page 210. Bomb shattered London, Moscow, Tokyo. This is this is sort of, I guess, allegorical for his cutting with the Scythe is the damage it's causing. As he was cutting, bombs shattered London, Moscow, Tokyo. The blade swung insanely, and the kilns of Belsen and Bushwald took fire. The blade swaying crimson wet, and mushroom vomited blood out blind suns at white sands. Hiroshima, Bikini, and up through and in continental Siberian skies. The grains wept in a green rain, falling. Korea, Indochina, Egypt, India, tremble. Asia stirred. Africa woke up in the night. Basically, he's the Grim Reaper that brings on deaths of everyone in the world, apparently. So even in other countries, is what that's symbolizing, and then the story just kind of ends. So there's no happy ending for this poor guy. So we see here a common theme in all three stories: child death. We have the theme is of really what it means to live and die as a human is the backbone of these stories. The human plight that we're all going to die eventually, and coming to terms with that death through our own or experiencing it in others. And then, yeah, so death as the human plight, the human condition, the inevitable destination where we're all going. And then death and suffering. Even the little boy in the emissary was dying and suffering and couldn't emotionally and psychologically, he couldn't go run and be free. And you feel like he's so alone in this story. We have at the lake the suffering of trauma and loss of a friend dying in front of you, a girl you loved, a little girl. We have in the Scythe suffering because he kind of got taken over by greed. He was poor and destitute, and this farm met his dreams of having abundance of food and finally getting to start over. And he can't control his impulses because he's being driven. And we have just like the shame and his and the Scythe represents the power of taking life. So now we have the perspective of taking life and the power we have to take life if we want it, our own or others. So there are really some very interesting ways that death as the human condition is shown in these three stories. They're all very short stories. You can read each one in probably 20 minutes. If you really want to take notes, 30 tops. I will do another video on a few more of the stories. I'll do a few separate videos if anyone wants to hear or in general. I'll have to come back and link them below as time goes on. If some of them might not be worthy of discussion, but I will. But Ray Bradbury really is the ultimate transcendent writer of crossing genres and exploring dark themes in an easy to access, readable way that we can emotionally relate to and feel an intrigue to continue reading because it's so brilliant the way that he writes. So yeah, that is my little bit of literary lecture for three short stories by an absolutely famous, fabulous American writer, Ray Bradbury. Perfect for the fall. So please let me know if you enjoyed this video, if you'd like to see more, anything else you'd like to see analyzed or any lectures on. Please let me know and I will see you in another video. Thanks so much for watching.